Dreaming doesn't make you a designer. No, but learning might.
Tiwonge, please focus on your work. This is not the right moment to discuss design.
I understand, madam.
Tiwonge, is this your studio?
Yes. Welcome to Mwezi Living.
She needed every paycheck to help settle her father's debt, so she swallowed the humiliation and returned to work. Years later, Luyando walked into an elegant design studio seeking help and froze when Tiwonge stepped forward. Would you help someone who once humiliated you? Tell us in the comments. Tiwonge Phiri stood beneath the wide glass entrance of Luyando Tembo's villa in Kabulonga, Lusaka, holding a neatly folded burgundy housekeeping uniform against her chest. The house looked like something from a luxury magazine. Pale stone walls framed enormous windows overlooking a manicured garden. Inside, polished marble floors reflected sculptural pendant lights, while vibrant Zambian artwork brought cobalt, gold, rust, and emerald into the otherwise minimalist interior. Tiwonge had seen beautiful houses before. She had once dreamed of designing them. First day, the question came from a woman arranging white lilies near the entrance. Tiwonge nodded. Yes, I'm Nasile. I handle the kitchen and events when Madam has guests. Tiwonge. Nasile gave her a quick but kind smile, then welcomed Tiwonge. Just remember one thing. Madam Tembo notices everything. That warning proved accurate. Luyando appeared moments later wearing a tailored ivory suit with a vivid chitenji scarf draped elegantly over one shoulder. Her hair was styled perfectly, and even the way she walked seemed calculated. She looked Tiwonge over from shoes to hairstyle. You understand what the position requires? Yes, madam. Bedrooms, guest areas, laundry, supervision, polishing, preparation when I entertain. I expect discretion, of course, and punctuality. Tiwonge straightened slightly. You won't have a problem with that. Luyando studied her for another moment. Good, Nasilele will show you around. Tiwonge followed quietly. She needed this job. That fact mattered more than pride. Her father's furniture workshop had once provided a modest but comfortable living for their family. Then he had borrowed money to purchase new equipment after securing what appeared to be a promising commercial contract. When the client withdrew unexpectedly, the machines remained and so did the repayments. Tiwonge had watched her father become quieter with every bill, so she had postponed the design course she wanted to complete and accepted the first stable position she could find. She told herself it was temporary, but temporary sacrifices had a dangerous way of becoming permanent. By the time Luyando's branch guests arrived, Tiwonge had already memorized the downstairs rooms. The dining area especially fascinated her. A long walnut table sat beneath 3 sculptural lights. Hand-woven baskets from local artisans decorated one wall, and oversized abstract paintings filled another. Everything was expensive, yet something bothered her. She stared at the room while adjusting a vase. The painting above the sideboard was beautiful, but it competed with the patterned chairs beneath it. The lighting made both seem heavier than they needed to be. Tiwonge, she turned immediately. Luyando stood behind her. Yes, madam, you've been staring at that wall. I was only checking the arrangement. Then check it faster. Tiwonge lowered her eyes. Yes, madam. The guests soon filled the room with polished conversation about property development, hospitality projects, travel and private investments. Tiwonge moved discreetly between them, collecting glasses and straightening table settings. Then one woman stopped beside the sideboard. She was tall, perhaps in her 40s, wearing an indigo dress with structured sleeves and understated gold jewelry. Luyando, she said, studying the wall, you still haven't solved this corner. Luyando laughed lightly. Anda, architects are impossible to invite anywhere. You inspect the room instead of enjoying it. I can do both. The women laughed. Chanta Mop stepped backward and narrowed her eyes at the arrangement. What would you change? Luyando shrugged. You tell me. Before Chanda could answer, Tiwonge instinctively glanced toward the curtains. Chanda noticed. You have an idea? Tiwonge froze. Luyando's expression changed immediately. She's housekeeping. Chanda did not seem bothered. I asked if she had an idea. Tiwonge hesitated. The safest answer was no, she knew that. Still, the room bothered her too much. The painting is beautiful, she said carefully, but the chair fabric and the artwork are both asking for attention. Silence followed. Tiwonge continued, more cautiously. If the chairs were moved slightly away from the wall and the curtains were softened with a warmer neutral, the artwork might feel more important instead of competing with everything around it. Shanda looked from the painting to the chairs. Then she smiled. That's actually very good. Another guest turned toward Tiwonge. Are you a designer? Tiwonge opened her mouth. Luyando answered first. No. Her voice remained pleasant, but the warmth had disappeared. Tiwonge works in my home. The guest nodded awkwardly. Tiwonge returned to the serving table. A few moments later, Luyando followed her into the hallway. Come here. Tiwonge stopped. Luyando folded her arms. I hired you because you presented yourself as professional. I am professional. Then behave professionally. Tiwonge's fingers tightened around the tray. I didn't mean to interrupt. You did interrupt. Miss Mopa asked me directly. And you could have politely declined. Tiwonge remained silent. Luyando leaned closer. Listen carefully. There is nothing wrong with ambition, but don't confuse cleaning my house with having a place in the conversations happening inside it. The words landed harder than Tiwonge expected. Still, she kept her voice calm. I understand. Do you? Yes, madam, good. Luyando walked away. For several seconds, Tiwonge remained alone beneath the soft hallway lighting. She looked down at her burgundy uniform. There was no shame in the work. She knew that. Her father had raised her to respect honest labor. What hurt was the assumption that because she cleaned beautiful rooms, she could never understand how to create one. Tiwonge took a slow breath and returned to work. Later, while clearing the dining table, she found a discarded brochure from a design exhibition. She opened it carefully. There were photographs of contemporary African interiors, textile samples, and an announcement for a professional workshop. Tiwonge read every line. Then she heard footsteps. She quickly folded the brochure and slipped it into the pocket of her uniform, not because she was stealing it, because suddenly it felt like evidence of a dream she was not ready to explain. When her wages eventually reached her account, most of the money would go toward her father's debt. Tiwonge had already decided that, but as she continued polishing the marble table, one thought refused to leave her. Maybe helping her family did not require burying every part of herself. And somewhere inside the elegant villa, Chandam Gwap had not forgotten the housekeeper who had seen what everyone else had missed. The brochure remained folded inside Tiwonge Phiri's handbag for several days. She had carried it from Luyando Tembo's villa to her father's modest home, then back again each morning, never quite finding the courage to throw it away. Whenever she opened her bag, the corner of the glossy paper reminded her of the life she had once imagined for herself. The villa in Kabulonga had finally grown quiet after another demanding day. Warm light spilled through the enormous glass walls, turning the polished marble floor almost golden. Outside, the carefully trimmed garden disappeared slowly beneath the evening shadows. Inside, Tiwonge stood alone in the formal living room, arranging cushions across a cream sectional sofa. Luyando had received several fabric catalogs earlier that week. One remained on the coffee table. Tiwonge tried not to look at it. She adjusted, that's one cushion. Then another, her eyes returned to the catalog. Finally, she opened it. Pages of linen, velvet, woven cotton, and patterned textiles passed beneath her fingers. Some combinations were elegant. Others seemed expensive, simply because someone had decided expensive meant beautiful. Tiwonge smiled faintly. She remembered sitting beside her father in his workshop years earlier while he sanded the edge of a dining table. Good furniture doesn't need to shout. Boalia had told her. She had laughed. Furniture can't shout, Daddy. Bad furniture can. The memory warmed her. Tiwonge turned another page. You seem comfortable. Her hand stopped. Luyando stood at the entrance to the room. She had changed from her business clothes into an elegant emerald chitange-inspired wrap dress, its geometric gold pattern catching the light. Tiwonge immediately closed the catalog. I was finishing the cushions. With my design book in your hands, it was already here. That wasn't my question. Tiwonge placed it carefully on the table. I was looking at it. I can see that. Luyando entered the room. There was no anger in her expression. Somehow that made the atmosphere more uncomfortable. Why? I like design. You mentioned nothing about that when I interviewed you. You didn't ask. Luyando raised an eyebrow. Tiwonge realized how the answer sounded. I didn't mean that disrespectfully. Then explain. Tiwonge hesitated before answering. I studied interior design for a while. For a while? I had to stop. Why? My family needed me. Luyando glanced at the burgundy uniform. And now you clean houses. I clean one house. Something flashed across Luyando's face. Perhaps irritation, perhaps surprise that Tiwonge had corrected her. She walked toward the window. You're an interesting woman, Tiwonge. I don't know if that's a compliment. It wasn't intended as one. Tiwonge said nothing. Luyando turned back. Do you know how many young people come to Lusaka believing talent alone will give them a glamorous career? I don't think design is glamorous. No. I think it's work. That answer seemed to catch Luyando off guard. Tiwonge continued carefully. You have to understand people, budgets, materials, space, how someone actually lives. A beautiful room that doesn't work for the person living there isn't good design. Luyando stared at her. You've thought about this, yes. Yet here you are. The sentence was quiet. It hurt more because of that. Tiwonge lowered her gaze toward the catalogue. Yes, here I am. Luyando picked it up. Perhaps you should remember that. Tiwonge looked at her again. What do you mean? I mean, there is nothing wrong with wanting more. But wanting something doesn't automatically mean you belong there. Tiwonge felt heat rise beneath her collar. She could have apologized. Instead, she asked, how does someone know where they belong? Luyando gave a small laugh. Experience usually tells them. Sometimes circumstances put people somewhere before experience gets the chance. The room became very still. Luyando's smile disappeared. Are you unhappy working here? No. Then why do I constantly feel as though you're trying to prove you're something other than what I hired? Tiwonge considered the question. I'm not trying to prove anything. Really? Yes. She looked directly at Luyando. I can be good at housekeeping and still be interested in design. One doesn't cancel the other. Luyando folded her arms. You really think you belong in this world, don't you? Tiwonge shook her head. No, that answer surprised Luyando. Tiwonge continued. But I think I can learn about it. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Luyando placed the catalogue firmly on the table. Finish the room. Yes, madam, and in the future, leave my professional materials alone. Of course. Luyando walked away. Only after her footsteps disappeared did Tiwonge release the breath she had been holding. She finished arranging the room and collected her bag. Outside, she found Nazilele waiting near the staff entrance. You look like someone just gave you a lecture. Tiwonge smiled tiredly. Was it that obvious? With Madame Tembo? Always. They walked together toward the gate. Nasilele glanced at her. You know, there is nothing embarrassing about this work. I know. Then don't let anyone make you feel small for doing it. Tiwonge stopped. I don't feel small because I clean her house. Then what bothers you? Tiwonge thought carefully. That she believes cleaning it is proof I could never design one. Nasilele studied her before smiling. Then perhaps one day you should design something. The simplicity of the sentence stayed with Tiwonge. When she reached home, Bolia was sitting beside several unpaid invoices from the workshop. He immediately began gathering them. You shouldn't be worrying about these. I already do. Tiwonge, she sat opposite him. How much is left? Sighed. You're not paying all of it. We discussed this. No. You decided. That's different. She almost smiled. Bolia reached across the table. My daughter, I am grateful for what you're doing, but I don't want my mistake to become your entire future. It wasn't your mistake. A contract failed. The debt still has my name on it. We're family. Yes. His voice softened, and family should help carry your dreams too. Tiwonge looked away. For the first time, she told him about the design brochure, about Chanda, about the room, and finally about Luyando. Bolia listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back. Do you believe Madame Tembo? Tiwonge frowned. About what? That where you are today tells you where you belong tomorrow. Tiwonge slowly shook her head. No, good. Bwalia squeezed her hand. Then don't waste your energy proving her wrong. Tiwong looked at him. Prove yourself right. The words followed her long after their conversation ended. The following day, she returned to the villa and performed every task exactly as expected. She did not touch another catalogue. She did not offer another opinion. But during her break, she opened her own notebook. On the first blank page, she began sketching the living room from memory. She moved the chairs, changed the curtains, adjusted the lighting. Then beneath the drawing, she wrote 3 quiet words. Start learning again. Tiwonge did not notice the woman standing several steps behind her. Chanda Mwape had returned to the villa. And this time, the architect was looking not at Luyando's expensive room, but at Tiwonge's sketch. Chanda Mwape did not interrupt immediately. She remained near the glass doors, watching Tiwonge Phiri draw careful lines across the page of her inexpensive notebook. The sketch was unfinished, yet Sanda could already recognize Luyando's formal living room. Tiwonge had repositioned the chairs, simplified the curtain treatment, and added small notes beside the lighting fixtures. At exactly 10:17 a.m., Tiwonge finally sensed someone behind her. She turned and quickly closed the notebook. Miss Mowap. Chanda smiled. She wore a structured coral dress with subtle titinje detailing along the sleeves, paired with simple gold earrings. You draw quickly. I was only practicing. Why did you close it? Tiwonge glanced toward the hallway. I'm working, and I'm distracting you. A little. Tanda laughed softly. Fair answer. Before she could say more, Luyando entered carrying several fabric samples. Chanda, finally, her cream trousers and vivid cobalt blouse looked immaculate against the warm, neutral interior. We need to solve the guest lounge before I lose patience with it. Chanda followed her. Tiwonge returned the notebook to her bag and resumed her duties. The guest lounge was one of the villa's most expensive rooms and, strangely, one of its least inviting. A sculptural sofa dominates the center. 2 imported armchairs faced a wall covered in patterned wallpaper. Heavy curtains framed the garden doors, while a large pendant light hung above a polished coffee table. Every individual piece was beautiful. Together, they seemed to fight. Luyando placed the fabric samples across the table. I'm considering replacing the chairs. Chanda studied the room. With what? Something lighter. That might help. Might? I'm not going to recommend that you spend money until I understand what's wrong. Luyando sighed. That is why I called you. Tiwonge entered carrying a tray of water. She placed it quietly on the side table. Chanda looked towards her. Tiwonge, yes? You were studying this room earlier, weren't you? Tiwonge stiffened. Luyando's eyes immediately moved between them. Studying? I saw her sketchbook, Tiwonge. The single word carried a warning. I sketched during my breaks, Tiwonge explained. Luyando set down a fabric sample. I thought we discussed professional boundaries. We did. Then why are you drawing rooms in my house? I wasn't planning to use the drawings anywhere. I was practicing. Chanda stepped in. There's nothing unusual about that. Architecture students sketch buildings constantly. She isn't an architecture student. No, Chanda replied. But apparently she wants to learn. Luyando's expression tightened. Tiwonge wished the floor would swallow the conversation. I should return to work. Wait. Chanda pointed toward the guest lounge. What bothers you about this room? Tiwonge looked at Luyando before answering. I don't think I should. I'm asking professionally. Luyando gave a restrained smile. Go ahead. Apparently everyone wants Tiwonge's opinion today. Tiwonge heard the sarcasm. She considered remaining silent. Then she looked around the room. The furniture is too close to the center. Chanda nodded. Continue. The sofa is large, so everything has been arranged around it. But that makes the garden feel disconnected from the room. Luyando folded her arms. And? Tiwonge walked several steps toward the windows. The curtains are beautiful, but they're heavy. The wallpaper is also strong, and the chairs have another pattern. She paused. There are too many things asking to be noticed. Chanda smiled slightly. What would you remove? Nothing yet. That answer surprised both women. Tiwonge pointed toward one armchair. I would move that first. Chanda helped slide it toward the window. Here, a little farther, they repositioned the second chair. Immediately, the room opened toward the garden. Tiwonge then folded one section of the heavy curtain backward, allowing more natural light across the wallpaper. The difference was subtle, but unmistakable. Luyando stared. Chanda walked slowly around the room. There, Luyando looked at her. There what? That's what was wrong. The chairs, the visual weight. Shanada gestured toward Tiwonge. She sought. Luyando's jaw tightened. It was furniture placement, Chanda. Let's not turn this into something extraordinary. I didn't say extraordinary. You're behaving as though she redesigned the villa. Tiwonge stepped backward. I only answered the question. Luyando turned toward her, and you happened to be right. There was something uncomfortable in the way she said it. Not admiration, Thranda noticed. So why does that bother you? It doesn't. It clearly does. Luyando picked up the fabric samples. I hired Tiwong to maintain my home. I simply don't want confusion about roles. Tiwong felt the familiar sting returning. Luyando looked directly at her. One correct observation doesn't make someone a designer. I know good. Luyando gathered the samples because sometimes people experience one lucky moment and begin imagining it means talent. Tiwong remained quiet. Chanda did not. That wasn't luck. Luyando gave her a sharp glance. You cannot know that from one suggestion. No, but I can recognize observation. Chanda turned to Tiwonge. Where did you study? Tiwonge named the program she had left. Why did you stop? My father's business ran out of financial trouble. And you want to return? Tiwong hesitated. Yes, it was the first time she had answered that question aloud without adding an excuse. Chanda reached into her handbag. Luyando watched. Chanda. But the architect had already removed a business card. She handed it to Tiwonge. My office occasionally hosts portfolio sessions and professional or workshops. Nothing glamorous, no promises. Tiwong stared at the card. What would I need? Work. I don't have professional projects. Then create studies. Of what? Chanda gestured around them. Rooms, cafes, shops, your father's workshop. Anything that demonstrates how you think. Tiwong slowly accepted the card. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't given you anything except an address. That sentence mattered to Tiwonge. No rescue, no miraculous opportunity, just a door she might choose to approach. After Chanda left, Luyando remained unusually quiet. Tiwonge continued cleaning. Eventually, Luyando spoke. Be careful. Swange looked up. With what? People like Chanda encourage potential because encouragement costs nothing. Swange slipped the card carefully into her pocket. Maybe and disappointment can be expensive. Tiwong met her eyes. So can never trying. Luyando's expression hardened. For a moment, Tiwonge expected to be reprimanded. Instead, Luyando walked away. That evening, Tiwonge returned to her father's workshop. The familiar scent of wood dust surrounded her as Bwalia examined Chanda's card. So? Tiwong leaned against an unfinished table. So what? Are you going? I don't know if I'm ready. Her father smiled. You weren't ready to carry my debts either, Daddy, but you did it. He handed the card back. Perhaps you should work just as hard for something that belongs to your future. Tiwonge looked around the workshop differently, at the stacked timber, the worn tools, the unfinished chairs. Suddenly, she saw more than her father's financial struggle. She saw lines, textures, light, possibility. She opened her notebook. On a fresh page, she began sketching the workshop. This time, she did not hide what she was doing. And for the first time since putting on the burgundy uniform, Tiwonge allowed herself to believe that survival and ambition did not have to be enemies. Tiwonge Phiri sat at the small dining table in her father's home, surrounded by fabric samples, tracing paper, sharpened pencils, and 3 cups that had once held tea. The neighborhood outside was still quiet. A single lamp illuminated the pages of her growing portfolio. For weeks, Tiwonge had followed the same demanding routine. She worked at Luyando Tembo's villa, completed her responsibilities without complaint, returned home, helped her father where she could, and then studied design. Some nights, exhaustion defeated her. Other nights, ambition did. Today, ambition had won. Tiwonge moved a small rectangle representing sofa across the floor plan she had drawn. No, she erased it. Too crowded. You're arguing with furniture again. Tiwonge looked up. Luyando Phiri stood in the doorway wearing a faded shirt and comfortable trousers. Daddy, you should be resting. So should you. I am working. That is precisely my concern. He walked closer and examined the table. There were sketches of cafes, bedrooms, reception areas, and his furniture workshop. You did all these? Most of them. Balia lifted one drawing. It showed his workshop transformed into a contemporary furniture showroom while preserving the original workbench as a centerpiece. He smiled. You made my old place look expensive. It doesn't need to be expensive. What does it need? Purpose. She pointed at the drawing. Customers currently enter through the workshop. They see sawdust, unfinished pieces, and tools everywhere. That's because it is a workshop. Tiwonge laughed. I know. But if you divided the front section, customers could see finished pieces first. They'd understand what you make before seeing how you make it. Bolia studied the sketch again. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about everything. That answer made his smile disappear. He pulled out a chair, Tiwonge's seat, then stopped drawing. She reluctantly placed down her pencil. Bolia folded his hands. How much of your salary did you send toward my debt this month? Tiwonge looked away. Tiwonge, most of it. How much is most? Enough. He sighed. I told you to stop doing this, and I told you we're family. I remember. Then why are we discussing it again? Because you're working yourself into the ground for a debt you did not create. You didn't create it intentionally either. That doesn't make it yours. Tiwonge reached for her pencil. Bolia placed his hand over it. No, she looked at him. What? Listen to me as your father, not as someone whose bills you're trying to. His voice softened. I made a business decision. It failed. That happens. You were trying to expand. Yes. You couldn't know the client would withdraw. No. Then stop calling it your mistake. Bolia smiled sadly. You always defend everyone. Tiwonge frowned. What does that mean? It means you have become very good at finding reasons why other people deserve understanding. He paused. But I don't hear you offering yourself the same kindness. The words unsettled her. I am fine. You're exhausted. I'm managing. You work in that villa. You study whenever you can. You come here and worry about me. When exactly are you building a life that belongs to Tiwonge? This is my life. No, this is your responsibility. Bolia pushed the portfolio toward her. This is your life trying to speak. Tiwonge stared at the drawings. She wanted to argue. Instead, her eyes began to sting. I can't just leave you with everything. I didn't ask you to. You need help. Yes, and the workshop will survive or it won't. Daddy, I mean it. Balia leaned forward. If keeping my workshop alive requires burying my daughter's future, then perhaps it doesn't deserve to survive. Tiwonge shook her head. You don't mean that. I do. Silence settled between them. Eventually, Balia reached into her drawer and removed the envelope. What is that? Money. From where? I sold the large dining set. Tiwonge's face brightened. The Mukwa one? The same. That customer finally returned. No, a different customer saw photographs of it. Balia smiled. Apparently someone convinced me to arrange my finished pieces properly and take better photographs. Tiwonge stared at him. You changed the workshop? Only the front. Without telling me, I wanted to see whether your idea worked, and he tapped the envelope. That is your answer. Tiwonge laughed genuinely this time. Balia pushed the envelope toward her. Take some. No, don't start. You need it for the debt. I am paying part of the debt, and the rest. You are going to use it for the workshop Chanda told you about. Tiwonge immediately shook her head. Daddy, you said the portfolio session requires a registration fee. I can save for it. You already saved for it. How? By helping me when I needed you. He pushed the envelope closer. Now allow me to help you. Tiwonge stared at the money. Accepting it felt strangely difficult. She had become so accustomed to giving that receiving felt irresponsible. Balia seemed to understand. Love is not supposed to move in only one direction, my daughter. Her eyes filled. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you. Good. He stood. Now sleep. I need to finish this layout. Tiwonge, one more page. You said that yesterday. She smiled. One page. Bolia shook his head and walked away. Later, Tiwonge carried her portfolio to Chanda Mapei's professional workshop. The room was nothing like the fantasy she had once attached to the design industry. Nobody applauded her sketches. Nobody immediately declared her brilliant. Instead, professionals questioned everything. Why this fabric? Because I like the texture. That isn't enough. Another reviewer pointed toward her restaurant concept. How much would this cost? I haven't calculated everything. Then it isn't a proposal. It's a picture. The criticism embarrassed her. But Tiwonge wrote down every word. Chanda eventually stopped beside her portfolio. How are you feeling? Like I know nothing. Excellent. Tiwong stared at her. Chanda smiled. People who believe they already know everything are difficult to teach. She turned one page. You have instinct. Your proportions are good. You understand warmth. Then she tapped the budget section. But instinct will not manage a contractor. Another page. And beautiful drawings won't save a client from bad measurements. Tiwong nodded. So I'm not ready. I didn't say that. What are you saying? That now you know what to learn. Those words changed something. Tiwong stopped treating criticism as proof she did not belong. She began treating it as instruction. Over the following weeks, her notebooks changed. Beautiful sketches were joined by measurements. Material prices, supplier lists, lighting calculations, budget alternatives. She still returned to Luyando's villa wearing the same burgundy uniform. Luyando still spoke to her as an employee. The marble still needed polishing. The guest room still needed preparing. Nothing visible had changed. Yet Tiwonge had. During one break, she opened her portfolio and found the earliest sketch of Luyando's living room. She almost laughed at how incomplete it seemed now. Nasilele sat beside her. What's funny? My old drawing. Was it bad? Noku Tiwonge considered the question. It was hopeful. And now? She turned to a new page filled with measurements and annotations. Now it's becoming useful. Nasilele smiled. Careful. Soon we'll have to call you Madam Designer. Please don't. Why? Because I haven't earned it yet. Tiwonge closed the portfolio. But I will. For the first time, the words did not sound like a dream. They sounded like a decision. The invitation-only gathering at Luyando Tembo's Kabulonga villa was supposed to celebrate the expansion of her hospitality company. The glass-walled residence glowed beneath sculptural pendant lights while carefully dressed guests moved between the living room and garden terrace. Women wore elegant chitenje gowns in sapphire, coral, emerald, and gold, while soft instrumental music blended with polished conversations about boutique hotels, property development, tourism, and investment. Tiwonge Phiri moved quietly through it all in her burgundy housekeeping uniform. Months earlier, the uniform had made her feel invisible. Tonight, it reminded her that she was living two lives. In one, she polished marble tables and prepared rooms for people discussing businesses she could barely imagine owning. In the other, she studied materials, prepared budgets, attended workshops, built portfolio projects, and learned how beautiful ideas became functional spaces. Neither life embarrassed her, but only one was where she intended to remain. Tiwong, Luyando approached in a striking copper and indigo chitenje gown. The terrace needs attention. I've already prepared it. The cushions, lanterns, checked. Guest bathroom. Prepared, Luyando paused. You seem very confident tonight. I'm prepared. There's a difference. Tiwong smiled politely. Then I'm prepared. Before Luyando could respond, another guest approached. She turned. A woman in a structured teal dress was studying her carefully. Yes, I know you. Tiwong did not recognize her immediately. Then she remembered. You attended Miss Mwop's portfolio workshop. The woman smiled. And so did you? Luyando's expression changed. You two know each other? Only professionally, the woman replied. I reviewed one of her concepts. She looked at Tiwonge. The furniture workshop conversion. Tiwonge smiled. My father's workshop, that was yours? Yes. I remember it because you didn't try to turn the place into something it wasn't. You kept the workbench. My father has used it for years. That was the strongest decision. Luyando stood silently beside them. The guest continued. Have you developed the project further? I have. Do you have your portfolio? Tiwonge hesitated. Not with me. You should send it to me. Before Tiwonge could answer, Luyando gave a light laugh. I think we're getting slightly carried away. The woman turned toward her. How? Tiwong has interests outside her employment. That's perfectly fine. But tonight she's working. But the message was clear. The guest nodded. Of course. Another time then. She walked away. Tiwong reached for an empty glass. Luyando stopped her. A word. They moved into the quieter hallway. Luyando's voice dropped. What exactly have you been telling my guests? Nothing. She knew you. From the workshop. Which workshop? The professional portfolio session I attended. So you actually went? Yes. Luyando looked almost amused. And now I'm continuing to study. With Chanda? Not exactly. She introduced me to resources and workshops. Luyando glanced toward the reception room. Tiwong, people in those rooms have spent years building professional reputations. I understand. Do you? Yes, because I don't want anyone thinking I'm somehow responsible for presenting you as a designer. I never said you were. Luyando's expression hardened. That isn't the point. What is the point? The question escaped before Tiwonge could soften it. Luyando stared at her. You are becoming too comfortable. Tiwong felt something inside her go still. Not anger, clarity. I perform every responsibility you give me. That is not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Luyando lowered her voice further. You need to understand the difference between aspiration and qualification. Tiwong nodded slowly. You're right. Luyando seemed surprised. Excuse me? Ambition isn't qualification. For the first time, Tiwonge did not lower her eyes. That's why I've been studying, Luyando said nothing. I've been attending workshops, learning budgeting, studying materials, practicing measurements, building a portfolio. And you think that makes you ready? No, Seiko, it makes me more prepared than I was yesterday. Luyando's face tightened. Be careful that encouragement doesn't give you unrealistic expectations. Tiwonje looked toward the elegant reception room. Can I ask you something? Luyando folded her arms. What? Why does my trying bother you? It doesn't. Then why do you keep reminding me where I work whenever someone notices something else about me? Silence. Tiwong continued. I have never been ashamed to clean your house. Then stop behaving as if this work is beneath you. I don't. Her voice remained gentle. That is the problem. You seem to think I must either respect this job or want another life. I can do both. Luyando looked away. You're being emotional. No. Tiwong surprised herself with how steady she felt. I think I'm finally being clear. Footsteps sounded nearby. Nasilele appeared carrying a tray, noticed the tension and stopped. Everything all right? Yes, Tiwong said. Luyando answered almost simultaneously. Fine. Nasilele hesitated before continuing toward the terrace. Luyando turned back. Finish your duties. We can discuss this another day. Tiwong watched her leave. For months, she had imagined what it might feel like to finally answer Luyando. She expected triumph. Instead, she felt tired. Later, while gathering abandoned glasses from the terrace, Tiwonge noticed Chanda standing near the garden. You survived, Chanda said, barely. I heard part of that conversation. Tiwonge sighed. I didn't intend to argue. You didn't. It felt like arguing. Setting a boundary often does when people are accustomed to you having none. Tiwong absorbed that. Chanda looked toward the villa. Are you staying here for tonight? No, Tiwonge understood. I need the salary. That wasn't my question. Tiwong looked through the glass walls at the magnificent house, then down at her uniform. I think I've learned everything this place can teach me. Chanda nodded. Then leave correctly. No dramatic exit? Drama feels good for 5 minutes. Reputation lasts longer. Tiwonge smiled. The following day, she prepared a formal resignation letter. She thanked Luyando for the employment. She offered appropriate notice. She documented her responsibilities so whoever replaced her could transition smoothly. When Luyando read the letter, she looked genuinely surprised. You're resigning? Yes. Because of what I said. No, then why? Tiwong thought carefully. Because staying has started costing me more than leaving. Luyando placed the letter on the marble counter. And what exactly will you do? Start small. That isn't a plan. No, Tiwong smiled. It's a beginning. Luyando studied her for a long moment. You may discover the world outside this house is less impressed by you than Chanda is. Maybe. And if you fail? Tiwonge looked around the villa she had cleaned hundreds of times. Then I'll learn something and try differently. She picked up her bag. For once, the burgundy uniform did not feel like a symbol of humiliation. It represented honest work that had carried her family through a difficult season. Tiwonge would never be ashamed of it. But she finally understood something important. Gratitude for the job that helped you survive did not require staying there forever. And when Tiwonge walked through the glass doors, she did not wonder whether Luyando would regret losing her. She wondered what she herself might become now that she had stopped asking permission to try. Tiwonge Phiri stood outside a modest design studio in Rhodes Park with a portfolio beneath one arm and a nervousness she refused to call fear. The building was nothing like Luyando Tembo's magnificent villa. There were no marble floors or towering glass walls. The reception area contained 2 desks, shelves crowded with material samples, rolls of drawings, fabric books, and several chairs waiting to be reupholstered. A brass plaque beside the entrance read, Mwamba & Co. Interiors. Tiwonge took a breath and stepped inside. You're early. Chanda Mwap was standing beside a work table covered with architectural plans. I thought early was good. It is, unless you're expecting me to entertain you. Tiwong smiled. I brought work. Better answer. Chanda gestured toward a desk. Although Chanda did not own the studio, she frequently collaborated with its design team and had recommended Tiwong's for a junior assistant position. Recommended, not guaranteed. Tiwong had completed 2 interviews, submitted her portfolio, and produced a sample residential concept before receiving the offer. The salary was lower than she had hoped. The opportunity was larger than she had expected. A man carrying several fabric rolls entered from the back room. He wore a mustard shirt with patterned chitenge cuffs. Tiwong? Yes, I'm Mulenga Sakala. He placed the fabrics on the table. Upholstery, materials, occasional rescuer of designers who choose beautiful fabrics that cannot survive real human beings. Tiwonge laughed. Does that happen often? Constantly. Chanda pointed toward him. Listen to Mulenga. He knows what materials actually do after designers finish making pretty presentations. Mulenga nodded solemnly. Finally, someone respects me. Don't become comfortable. Too late. For the first time in months, Tiwonge entered a workplace where conversation about design did not feel forbidden. She wanted to prove herself immediately. That became her first mistake. Her initial assignment involved a reception area for a small legal consultancy. Tiwonge developed a sophisticated concept using warm timber, patterned textiles, and elegant brass details. She presented it proudly. The senior designer studied the proposal. This is beautiful. Tiwong smiled. Thank you. And completely unsuitable. Her smile disappeared. Why? The client requested durability and controlled costs. I considered the budget. Did you? The designer pointed toward one textile. This is imported. Tiwong looked at her notes. The supplier gave me a quotation for the fabric. Yes. What about delivery? Tiwong hesitated. The designer pointed toward the brass fixtures. Installation, another silence. And this custom cabinet. My father could make something similar. Has he priced it? No. Then you don't have a budget. Tiwonge felt embarrassed. I can correct it. I expect you to. She carried the proposal back to her desk. Mulenga leaned over the partition. You look wounded. My design was called completely unsuitable. Congratulations. She stared at him. For what? Your first professional rejection. That is something to celebrate? No, but eventually you'll have so many that this one will stop feeling important. Despite herself, Tiwonge laughed. Then she rebuilt the proposal. She replaced imported fabric with a durable, locally available option. She spoke with suppliers instead of relying on catalogs. She asked her father to price the cabinetry properly. The revised design looked less dramatic. It worked better. That lesson stayed with her. More followed. A client disliked a color palette she loved. A contractor informed her that one of her measurements would leave a cabinet unable to open properly. A A supplier delivered a different shade of fabric from the sample. Another client changed her mind after Tiwonge had already revised the concept several times. On difficult days, Tiwonge remembered Luyando's warning. Perhaps the world outside the villa really would be less impressed with her. But Tiwonge discovered something unexpected. She did not need the world to be impressed. She needed to become competent. One afternoon, she joined Mulenga at his upholstery workshop. He placed 2 pieces of fabric in front of her. Which one? The blue. Why? Bare texture. For a decorative chair, yes. He poured a little water onto both samples. The blue absorbed it immediately. The second repelled most of the liquid. Tiwong understood. Dining chairs. Exactly. Mulenga smiled. Designed for the life happening in the room, not the photograph taken after installation. She wrote the sentence in her notebook. Months of learning became experience. Experience became confidence. Tiwonge gradually received small projects of her own, a bedroom refresh, a home office, a cafe corner, and eventually the reception area of a boutique guest house. She saved carefully. Her father's workshop also improved. The showroom idea brought new customers, while Balia began collaborating with younger craftspeople instead of trying to handle every order himself. One evening, father and daughter stood inside the renovated front section. Bolya ran his hand across a finished table. You changed this place. We changed it. No, he shook his head. You saw something I couldn't. Tiwonge smiled. Apparently, I have a habit of staring at rooms until they confess their problems. Bolya laughed. Then perhaps you should charge people for staring. Eventually, she did. After gaining several years of experience, Tiwonge began considering independence. Not because she believed employment was beneath her. She wanted to explore a specific idea: contemporary interiors rooted in local materials, craftsmanship, and the personalities of the people using them. Chanda challenged her immediately. Do you have clients? A few? Capital, some savings? Suppliers? Yes, business plan? Tiwonge placed a folder on the table. Chanda opened it. You came prepared. I learned what happens if your first 3 months are terrible. I reduce expenses, and if a client refuses to pay, written contracts and staged payments. Chanda smiled. What happened to the woman who brought beautiful sketches without complete budgets? She became expensive to embarrass. Chanda laughed. That might be the first sign you're ready. Tiwong rented a compact commercial space in Rhodes Park. It had large front windows, uneven flooring, and far less room than she originally wanted. She loved it immediately. Bwalia built the central consultation table. Mulinga produced upholstered sample chairs. Tiwonge selected shelves for textiles, timber samples, ceramics, and woven pieces from local makers. Above the entrance, she installed a simple sign: Mwizi Living Studio. On opening day, there were no reporters, no wealthy crowd, no miraculous queue of clients. There were flowers from her father, a handwritten card from Nasilele, and a message from Chanda that read, Now do the work. Tiwonge smiled when she read it. Her first months were uneven. Some weeks were busy. Others frightened her. She learned accounting because she had to. She followed up invoices. She negotiated with suppliers. She apologized when mistakes were hers and refused blame when they were not. Slowly, people began recommending her. A restaurant hired her. Then a professional couple renovating their home. Then a small lodge. Photographs of completed spaces began replacing student sketches in her portfolio. One afternoon, Mulenga walked into Mwezi Living carrying a fabric book. Madam Designer, Tiwong pointed at him. I told you never to call me that. That was years ago. It still applies. He looked around the studio. You should look at what you've built before pretending the title embarrasses you. Tiwong followed his gaze. She saw the consultation table her father had made, the fabric shelves, the drawings, the project board carrying actual client names. Then she smiled. There had been no sudden transformation, no inheritance, no hidden fortune, no powerful person had rescued her. There had only been thousands of ordinary decisions made when nobody was watching. Study, ask, fail, correct, save, try again. The burgundy housekeeping uniform remained folded carefully inside a box at home. Tiwong had never thrown it away. It represented the job that had helped her family survive when they needed it. She was proud of that woman, but she was equally proud that the woman had kept moving. Then the studio receptionist approached her desk. "We received an inquiry about a hospitality project." Tiwonge looked up. "Which company?" The receptionist handed her the consultation request. Tiwonge read the company name. She recognized it immediately, Luyando Tembo's hospitality group. For several seconds, Tiwonge said nothing. Mulenga noticed her expression. "Problem?" Tiwonge placed the paper carefully on the table. "No." She looked around Mezi living studio. Just someone from an old room knocking on the door of a new one. Sunlight poured through the tall front windows of Mwezi living studio, illuminating shelves of woven textiles, polished timber samples, handmade ceramics, and neatly arranged design books. Tiwonge Phiri stood behind a glass partition studying plans for a boutique lodge project. She wore a tailored emerald dress with subtle chitenge panels along the sleeves. Her hair was swept into a neat low bun and a measuring tape lay beside the gold bracelet her father had given her when the studio signed its first major contract. The woman reflected in the glass looked very different from the housekeeper who had once crossed the marble floors of a Kabulonga villa in a burgundy uniform. But Tiwonge had never tried to erase that woman. She had built upon her. "Tiwonge," her receptionist, Mwila, appeared at the doorway. "Yes? Your consultation has arrived." Tiwonge closed the project folder. "The hospitality inquiry?" Mwila nodded. "Mrs. Tembo." For a moment, Tiwonge did not move. She had known the company name on the consultation request. Still, seeing it written on paper had felt different from hearing that name spoken inside her own studio. "Would you like me to bring her in?" Tiwonge looked around the room. At the consultation table her father had built, at the sample boards she had assembled, at photographs of completed projects displayed along one wall. "Yes." Mwila hesitated. "Everything okay?" "Everything is fine." Tiwonge straightened the folder. "Please bring her in." Moments later, heels clicked softly across the polished concrete floor. Luyando Tembo entered wearing a sophisticated cobalt suit over a patterned silk blouse. Her appearance was as polished as Tiwonge remembered. Elegant jewelry, structured handbag, immaculate posture. She took several steps into the studio before noticing Tiwonge. Then she stopped. "Tiwonge? Hello, Miss Tembo." Luyando's eyes moved slowly around the studio. "You work here?" Tiwonge almost smiled. "I do." Luyando looked toward the sign visible through the front windows, then toward the project boards. "You're with Mwezi Living?" "Yes." There was a brief pause. "What do you do here?" Before Tiwonge could answer, Mwila returned carrying water. Mrs. Phiri founded the studio. Luyando turned sharply toward her. Mwila placed the glasses on the consultation table. "Please let me know if you need anything." "Thank you, Mwila." When she left, silence returned. Luyando looked at Tiwonge differently, not with admiration, not yet. Mostly with surprise. "I didn't realize." "I assumed you didn't. The company shortlisted the studio through our project committee." "I know. And you knew it was my company?" After receiving the consultation request, Luyando placed her handbag beside the chair. "You could have declined." "Yes, but you didn't." "No, why?" Tiwonge gestured toward the chair opposite her. "Perhaps we should discuss the project first." Luyando sat. Tiwonge opened the folder. "Your brief describes a boutique guest house targeting business travelers and regional visitors. You want contemporary luxury without creating something that could belong in any city in the world." Luyando watched her carefully. "That is correct. You also want local craftsmanship represented without making the interior feel themed." "Yes." Tiwonge turned several pages. "I think that's the strongest part of the brief." Luyando leaned forward despite herself. Tiwonge showed her a preliminary mood board. Warm timber, deep indigo, muted copper, contemporary furniture paired with handwoven accents, and carefully selected Zambian artwork. Luyando studied it. "This is preliminary?" "Very." "You prepared this before meeting me." "We prepare initial research for every shortlisted consultation." Luyando touched one material sample. "This is beautiful. It's produced locally. I would have assumed it was imported." That assumption is exactly what we try to challenge. The sentence carried no accusation. Still, Luyando heard something inside it. Her eyes lifted toward Tiwonge. You've changed, Tiwonge. Consider the observation. I've learned. That isn't what I meant. I know. Luyando looked again around the studio. I heard you were studying after you left my house. I was already studying before I left. Yes. Luyando looked down. I remember Tiwonge waited. There had been a time when she had imagined this reunion. In some versions, Luyando entered desperate and unsuccessful, while Tiwonge stood powerful behind an enormous desk. In others, Tiwonge delivered a perfect speech reminding her of every humiliating sentence. Reality felt quieter and, strangely, more satisfying. Luyando was not ruined, she remained successful. Tiwonge did not need her failure to prove her own growth. Your studio is impressive, Luyando finally said. Thank you, I suppose Chanda helped. She did. Luyando nodded as if that explained everything, Tiwonge continued. She introduced me to professional workshops. Later, she recommended me for a junior position. And eventualities? No, Tiwonge smiled. This took several years. Luyando looked at her. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. You did a little. To Tiwonge's surprise, Luyando smiled faintly. Perhaps I did. The tension softened. Then Mulenga Sakala entered carrying a box of samples. Tiwonge, the upholstery supplier, finally stopped. Sorry, consultation? Yes. Tiwonge stood. Mulenga, this is Luyando Tembo. Miss Tembo, Mulenga Sakala, our materials and upholstery consultant, they exchanged greetings. Mulenga placed the samples down. The locally woven performance fabric arrived. Tiwonge examined it. Better than the previous batch? Much. Luyando touched the material. This could work for the guest house. Mulenga glanced at Tiwonge. She has good instincts. Luyando's expression shifted. I've heard that before. Tiwonge met her eyes. For the first time, both women understood the reference. Mulenga sensed something unspoken but wisely gathered his papers. I'll leave you to it. After he left, Luyando leaned back. I owe you an apology. Tiwonge had not expected it so soon. For what specifically? Luyando looked uncomfortable. That sounds like a dangerous question. It shouldn't be. Luyando considered her words. I thought I understood your limits because I understood your circumstances. Tinje remained silent. I saw your uniform, your financial situation, the work you were doing, and I treated those things as evidence of what you could become. That hurt me. I know. No, Tiwonge's voice remained calm. I don't think you did know. Luyando accepted that, then I'm beginning to. Tiwonge closed the material box. I appreciate you saying that. Does that mean you'll take the project? It means I accept the apology. Luyando raised an eyebrow. Those are different things. Very. For the first time, Luyando laughed. I underestimated you. Yes, there was no cruelty in Tiwonge's answer, only truth. Luyando glanced toward a framed photograph near the shelves. It showed Bwalia standing beside the consultation table he had built for the studio. How is your father? Better. The workshop is doing well. And the debt? Hand. Because of you? Because of us? Tiwonge smiled. My father eventually stopped allowing me to carry everything. Luyando looked thoughtful. That's difficult for some women. What is? Realizing that being needed and being valued aren't always the same thing. Tiwonge studied her. For the first time, she wondered what Luyando herself had sacrificed to maintain the polished life she displayed to everyone. Perhaps success had also taught Luyando the wrong lessons. Tiwonge returned to the project folder. If Mwezi takes this project, there will be conditions. Budget, among other things. Tell me, my team will be treated as professionals. That includes assistants, installers, craftspeople, cleaners, and anyone else who works us on the site. Luyando became very still. Tiwonge continued. No one becomes less deserving of respect because their job requires them to carry a toolbox, clean a floor, or serve refreshments. The old villa seemed to enter the room without either woman naming it. Luyando slowly nodded. Understood, and design decisions will follow the agreed process. I won't have my junior staff silenced because someone thinks their title makes their observations irrelevant. Another pause. Understood. Tiwonge extended the project folder across the table. Then we can continue the conversation. Luyando placed her hand on it. You could have refused to see me. I could have. Why didn't you? Tiwonge looked around Mwezi living studio. Because I didn't build this place to spend the rest of my life reacting to what happened in your house. Luyando lowered her eyes. Tiwonge continued gently. I left because I wanted a future, not because I wanted revenge. Something in Luyando's expression changed. Perhaps that was the moment she finally understood the difference between the woman standing before her and the employee she once believed she could define. Years earlier, Luyando had stood in a magnificent room and reminded Tiwonge that she was only there to clean it. Now sat inside our room Tiwonge had created for herself. But Tiwonge felt no need to remind her who belonged there. She already knew. Tiwonge Phiri stood inside the unfinished boutique guest house that had brought Luyando Tembo back into her professional life. Sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking a landscaped courtyard. Bare walls waited for artwork, protective sheets covered newly installed flooring, and several pieces of locally crafted furniture stood tagged for inspection. It was not glamorous yet. Tiwonge preferred projects at this stage. An unfinished room could still become almost anything. Mulenga Sakala crouched beside an upholstered bench, inspecting the stitching. This needs to go back. Tiwonge ran her fingers along the seam. The fabric? Fabric is fine. Stitching isn't. Can they correct it without delaying installation? Yes, then send it back. Mulenga smiled. 5 years ago, you would have stared at that seam for 10 minutes before asking Chanda what to do. 5 years ago, I thought confidence meant knowing every answer. And now? Now I know who to ask. That sounds less impressive. It saves more money. They laughed. Across the room, Luyando was speaking with 2 members of her hospitality team. The collaboration had been professional since their meeting at Mwezi Living. Not warm, not uncomfortable. Professional. Tiwonge preferred it that way. Luyando approached holding a project folder. We have a problem. Mulenga immediately looked at Tiwonge. I suddenly remember somewhere else I need to be. You're terrible. Experienced. He collected his samples and moved toward another room. Luyando watched him leave. Does he always do that? Whenever his senses complicate conversations. Smarman, Tiwonge gestured toward the folder. What happened? The investors reviewed the updated guest suites, and they like them. That doesn't sound like a problem. They want to expand the design scope. Tiwonge waited. They want Mwezi to handle the restaurant and private meeting rooms too. Tiwonge blinked. That is considerably more work. I know, and a different budget. I know, and a revised schedule. Luyando smiled. You're enjoying this. Enjoying what? Being the person telling me what something will cost. Tiwonge laughed despite herself. A little. For a moment, they were simply 2 professional women discussing a project. Then Luyando's expression became serious. There is something else. What? One of the investors asked why I hadn't hired your studio originally. Tiwonge crossed her arms. What did you say? That I didn't know about it. That's true. Partly. Tiwonge studied her. Luyando continued. I also told them I knew you before Mwezi existed and I didn't explain how. You don't owe them our history. No, Luyando looked toward the unfinished reception area, but perhaps I owe you something more than an apology in a private office. Tiwonge's expression softened. You don't need to perform regret for me. I'm not trying to. Then what are you trying to do? Luyando took a breath. Understand why I behaved that way. Tiwonge did not answer immediately. The old version of herself might have rushed to comfort Luyando. She no longer believed every uncomfortable silence needed to be rescued. Eventually, Luyando spoke. When I started my company, I entered rooms where people assumed I was someone's assistant. Tiwonge listened. I learned to dress differently, speak differently, never appear uncertain. I became obsessed with being taken seriously. And eventually, you started deciding who else deserved to be taken seriously. Luyando nodded. Yes, the admission came without defense. My mistake wasn't wanting respect, it was believing respect was scarce. Tiwonge looked at her. So you protected your place by reminding other people of theirs. Luyando gave a sad smile. That sounds terrible when you say it. It was terrible when you did it. Luyando laughed softly. Fair. They walked toward the restaurant area. A young design assistant named Musonda was arranging material samples across a temporary table. Tiwong, can I show you something? Of course. Musonda held up 2 tiles. I know we approved this one, but I'm worried it will make the restaurant colder once the dark timber arrives. Tiwong examined them. What would you use? The warmer limestone. Luyando looked at the samples. But the approved tile is more expensive. Musonda immediately became nervous. I know. I wasn't suggesting the other one because it's cheaper. Luyando opened her mouth, then stopped. Tiwong noticed. Explain your reasoning, Tiwong told Musonda. The younger woman pointed toward the mood board. The ceiling and furniture already have strong dark tones. The original tile works beautifully alone, but once everything is installed, I think the room may become too formal. Tiwong nodded. Good observation. She turned toward Luyando. What do you think? Luyando studied both samples. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then she handed the warmer tile back to Musonda. Show us a revised visual, Musonda smiled. I will. As she walked away, Tiwonge looked at Luyando. What? Nothing. You're smiling? I noticed you stopped yourself. From what? From dismissing her. Luyando sighed. I was going to say we had already paid professionals to make that decision. Musonda is a professional. I know. Do you? Luyando looked toward the assistant. I am learning. Tiwonge nodded. That matters. Later, the expanded scope was approved. It became one of Mwezi Living Studio's largest contracts. But what mattered more to Tiwonge was how the project operated. Her junior designers spoke during meetings. Craftspeople were credited for their work. Cleaners preparing completed rooms were addressed by name. Installers ate at the same project table as consultants when schedules became demanding. None of these things felt revolutionary. That was precisely the point. Respect should not feel revolutionary. During one site review, Tiwonge found Luyando speaking with the cleaning supervisor. The protective covering can come off after the furniture team finishes, the supervisor explained. Then we'll follow your sequence, Luyando replied. Tiwonge waited until the woman left. You asked her instead of instructing her. She knows her work better than I do. Tiwonge smiled. You really are learning. Please don't sound so surprised. I've known you longer than some people here. That is unfortunately true. Their relationship did not suddenly become friendship. Some wounds did not need to transform into closeness to prove they had healed. Instead, something more realistic developed. Respect. Luyando learned that apologizing did not erase consequences. Tiwonge learned that forgiveness did not require restoring someone to the position they once occupied in her life. Near the end of the project, Luyando joined Tiwonge beside a large window overlooking the courtyard. Do you ever wish you had left my house earlier? Tiwong thought about it. Sometimes. I wouldn't blame you. But then I remember who I was. Luyando waited. I thought endurance was always strength. And now? Sometimes leaving is strength. Tiwong looked across the unfinished guest house. Sometimes staying is fear wearing the clothes of loyalty. Luyando absorbed the sentence. You learned that from me? Partly. That isn't exactly flattering. Not every lesson comes from someone treating us well. Luyando nodded. Then she asked the question Tiwonge had once imagined hearing. Do you regret working for me? Tiwong looked at her. No, Luyando appeared surprised. I regret some things I accepted while working for you. There was an important difference. The salary helped my family. The experience taught me discipline. The house gave me rooms to study. And your treatment forced me to ask why I was allowing another person's opinion to become louder than my own. Luyando looked away. I wish I had been kinder. So do I. Tiwong said it without bitterness, but we can't redesign yesterday. Luyando smiled faintly. Spoken like an interior designer, we can decide what we build next. Across the room, Musonda called Tiwonge over to review the revised restaurant visual. Tiwonge started walking toward her team. Then Luyando spoke. Tiwonge, she turned. Thank you for taking the project. Tiwong smiled. I didn't take it for you. Luyando raised an eyebrow. I know, I took it because it was good work for my studio. That somehow makes me respect the decision more. Tiwong joined her team around the material table. Nobody there knew the full history behind the 2 women. They did not need to. Years earlier, Tiwonge had believed success would mean reaching a position where Luyando could no longer look down on her. She understood differently now. Success was not standing above the person who once stood above you. It was building a room where nobody needed to be made smaller for someone else to feel important. And that was the kind of room Tiwonge intended to keep creating. The completed boutique guest house in Lusaka opened its doors to investors, hospitality professionals, local artisans, and invited guests. Warm light flowed through the reception area at Tiwonge Phiri, and her team had spent months refining. Deep indigo textiles softened the clean architectural lines. Contemporary Zambian artwork hung against warm, neutral walls, while handcrafted timber furniture brought richness without overwhelming the space. Nothing had been selected simply because it was expensive. Everything had a reason for being there. Tiwonge stood near the restaurant entrance wearing a sophisticated emerald chitenge gown with structured sleeves and subtle gold detailing. Her father had insisted she buy something special for the opening. She had protested. Bwalia had ignored her. You spent years designing rooms for everyone else, he had told her. Allow yourself one beautiful dress. Now he stood several steps away wearing a charcoal suit with a patterned pocket square Tiwonge had shown for him. He looked around proudly. You use my tables. Of course, you could have ordered something more luxurious. Tiwonge smiled. They are luxurious. Bolia raised an eyebrow. You're biased. Completely. He laughed. Nearby, Mulenga was examining an upholstered chair. As though he expected to discover a defect during the opening, Tiwonge noticed. Stop inspecting the furniture. I am appreciating it. You're checking the stitching. Professional habit. The stitching is fine. That is because I checked it. Tiwonge shook her head. You are impossible. And yet Mwezi keeps hiring me. Temporary administrative failure. Mulenga laughed and lifted his glass. Across the reception room, Luyando Tembo welcomed several investors. She wore a striking copper and cobalt gown that reflected the polished confidence Tiwonge remembered from years earlier. But something about her had changed. Perhaps not her ambition. Perhaps not even her pride. What had changed was the way she carried those things. When a member of the cleaning team passed, Luyando moved aside and thanked her by name. Tiwonge noticed. Small things matter. Chanda Mwape approached Tiwonge holding a drink. You're staring. Observing designers always call staring observing. Tiwonge smiled. You taught me that. I taught you many things. You selectively remember the convenient ones. Chanda looked around. You did well. We did well. There she goes. What? Giving everyone else credit. They earned it. Yes. Chanda turned toward her. But so did you. Tiwonge became quiet. Chanda touched her arm. Learning to share credit is admirable. Learning to accept it is necessary. Before Tiwonge could respond, Luyando stepped toward the center of the reception area. The conversations gradually softened. She thanked the investors, construction team, consultants, and hospitality staff. Then she looked toward Tiwonge. There is one partnership I want to acknowledge separately. Tiwonge immediately felt uncomfortable. Mulenga whispered beside her, Don't run. I wasn't going to. You considered it. A little. Luyando continued. When this project began, our committee recommended a design studio whose work had started attracting attention for its thoughtful use of local craftsmanship. She gestured toward the room. That studio was Mwezi living. Several guests turned toward Tiwonge. Luyando paused. What most people here did not know was that I already knew its founder. Tiwonge felt Bolia look at her. Luyando's voice remained steady. Years ago, Tiwonge Phiri worked in my home. Our mama moved through several guests. She wore a housekeeping uniform, cared for my rooms, prepared my home for guests, and performed honest work with professionalism. Luyando stopped. Then came the part Tiwonge had not expected. The problem was never the work she did. The room became still. The problem was the way I allowed that work to shape my opinion of what she could become. Tiwonge looked directly at her. Luyando continued. I once thought someone's position gave me permission to decide how much weight their voice deserved. She glanced around the beautiful reception room. I was wrong. Nobody applauded immediately. Tiwonge was grateful for that. It made the moment feel less like performance and more like truth. Luyando gestured toward the Timbuktu textiles and furniture. This room exists because designers listen to craftspeople, architects listen to installers, managers listen to junior staff, and people were allowed to contribute beyond what someone else assumed their title permitted. Then she looked back at Tiwonge, and the woman who led that process once stood in my living room and saw what I couldn't see. This time, gentle applause spread through the room. Tiwonge did not feel victorious. She felt something quieter, closure. Later, she found Luyando near the courtyard. You didn't tell me you were going to say that. I thought you might stop me. I might have. That is why I didn't tell you. Tiwonge laughed. Then her expression softened. Thank you, Luyando looked surprised, for embarrassing myself publicly, for telling the truth without making yourself the victim. Luyando nodded. I've had practice admitting I was wrong. Good skill for business, terrible for the ego. They smiled. Luyando looked toward Boalia. Your father seems proud. He is. Did he ever know how I treated you? Tiwong hesitated. Some of it. I imagine he disliked me. He didn't know you well enough to dislike you. Luyando laughed. That sounds like something he would say. They stood silently for a moment. Then Luyando asked, Did you ever imagine this? What? Me walking into your workplace needing your studio. Tiwong smiled. Of course. I knew it. In my imaginary version, you were much more dramatic. How unfortunate. You were a desperate. I had an enormous office. There may have been rain. Luyando laughed loudly. And reality, better. Why? Tiwong looked through the windows at her team. Musonda was explaining a design detail to an investor. Mulenga was finally talking instead of inspecting chairs. Chanda was speaking with Balia beside one of his tables. Because I don't need you to lose for me to know that I won something. Luyando's smile disappeared into thoughtful silence. Tiwonge continued. If your life had collapsed, it wouldn't make my studio more valuable. No. And if you had never apologized, my work would still matter. Luyando nodded. That may be the most uncomfortable thing you've ever told me. It wasn't intended to be. That makes it worse. They both laughed. Later, Boalia joined his daughter beside one of the large windows. You're happy? Tiwong looked around. Yes, because of the project. Partly. Because Luyando apologized. Tiwonge considered it. No, her father waited, because I finally understand I didn't have to become someone extraordinary to prove I deserved respect when I was struggling. Boalia smiled. That took you long enough. Daddy, I've been telling you for years. You also told me furniture could shout. It can. She rested her head briefly against his shoulder. When the event ended, Tiwonge returned home and opened a box she had not touched for months. Inside lay the burgundy housekeeping uniform. She ran her fingers across the fabric. Once, she had imagined throwing it away when she became successful. Instead, she folded it carefully. There was dignity in that uniform. It had paid bills, helped her father, carried her through a difficult season. The shame had never belonged to the work. It belonged to anyone who believed honest work made another human being smaller. Tiwong closed the box. She did not need to forget the woman who had cleaned Luyando's beautiful rooms. She needed to honor her because that woman had kept learning when nobody expected anything from her. She had walked away without revenge. She had failed without quitting. And eventually, she had built rooms of her own. Not rooms where she could stand above other people. Rooms where everyone who entered could keep their dignity. In the months that followed, Mwezi Living Studio continued to grow, not into a glamorous empire overnight, but into the kind of business Tiwonge had always wanted, respected, sustainable, and human. She hired young designers for their curiosity rather than their connections, commissioned furniture from her father's expanding workshop, and made sure every craftsperson received visible credit for their work. Boalia finally cleared the remaining business debt and, instead of retiring, began training younger furniture makers who wanted to build careers of their own. Tiwonge and Mulenga also allowed their long friendship to develop slowly into something warmer, without either of them abandoning the lives they had built independently. Even Luyando remained part of Tiwonge's professional world. They never pretended the past had not happened, but they learned that reconciliation did not require rewriting it. One afternoon, Tiwonge stood inside her studio, watching sunlight fall across the consultation table her father had made. Years earlier, she had cleaned beautiful rooms while wondering whether she would ever design one. Now clients came seeking her vision. She smiled, not because she had become more worthy, but because she finally understood that her worth had been there all along. Tiwonge's journey reminds us that a difficult season should never be mistaken for a permanent identity. Honest work does not diminish anyone. A housekeeper, cleaner, waitress, assistant, caregiver, or struggling entrepreneur may carry ambitions and abilities invisible to the people around them. At the same time, dreams require more than believing in ourselves. Tiwonge progressed because she studied, accepted criticism, learned budgeting, made mistakes, built experience, and continued when success was still uncertain. Her story also carries an important lesson about sacrifice. Supporting the people we love can be beautiful, but love should not require one person to disappear so everyone else can survive. Finally, forgiveness does not mean surrendering boundaries. Tiwonge could work with Luyando again without pretending the humiliation never happened. She neither sought revenge nor returned to being the woman who silently accepted disrespect. Perhaps the deepest victory is not reaching positions where we can look down on those who once looked down on us. It is reaching a place where we no longer need anyone else to become smaller in order to know our own value.